Explain like I'm five. How have we not run out of metal yet? We have millions of cars, planes, rebar, jewelry, bullets, boats, phones, wires, etc. How is there still metal being made? Are we expected to run out anytime soon? There is a lot of metal in the ground, and we keep digging it up. Also, used metal can be somewhat easily reused compared to other materials. We have roughly 80 billion metric tons of iron ore in deposits, and over the last 15 years, that has actually increased because we discovered more deposits than we mined. Per year, we mine about 2.5 billion tons, so if we discover no more iron, we'd run out in less than 40 years, but it slows down as the recycling rate increases. Steel-wise, almost all new steel comes from recycled steel with a small amount of iron ore. Steel is the most recycled product in the world. There are a lot of them, especially iron and aluminum, which are both in the top 5 of the most abundant elements on Earth. But we also recycle much of what is being used, and pretty much all scrap from metalworking factories ends up melted and reused. Metals are very easily recycled. I've seen reports that 65% of aluminum is recycled. NHLLehigh Department Solid Waste Management's Recycling-Facts, aluminum. There's 1.4 by 10 to the power 21 tons of iron in the Earth's crust. If we can access 1/millionth of this, we can mine another 1,000 billion tons. By mass, there's more iron on Earth than pretty much any other element, though a lot is in the core. In the crust, aluminum is the most abundant element, followed by iron, oxygen, and calcium. So there's plenty of the most commonly used metals. This is very interesting. I never really thought about where all the metal we use comes from, and if we'll ever run out. But it makes sense that metal can be recycled and reused easily, and there's a lot of it in the ground. It's amazing that there's so much metal, like iron and aluminum, in the Earth's crust. And the fact that almost all new steel comes from recycled steel is mind-blowing. I never knew that. It's kind of reassuring to know that we probably won't run out of metal anytime soon, especially with how much of it can be recycled. So what are some other ways we can ensure that we have enough metal for the future? And do you think we'll ever reach a point where we might run out despite the recycling efforts? Let me know in the comments down below, and let's move right into our next Reddit post. Explain like I'm five. My understanding is that one company in Taiwan makes the greatest chips in the world and no one else can replicate them. How is that possible? That's not entirely true. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company Limited, is one of the premier chip manufacturing companies in the world, but they are hardly the only one. They are of note because they make everything from common chips used in everything from cars to cell phones to AMD's processors. Apple, Nvidia, AMD, and Qualcomm, for example, all use TSMC to manufacture their chips. But Samsung, Korea, and Intel US also have chip foundries of that caliber. TSMC's secret is just that they have large numbers of highly experienced people working for them and have developed very good processes. Samsung and Intel are similar in that regard, but TSMC is special in that the Taiwanese government has, in a sense, made semiconductor manufacturing the country's primary industry. Other companies, like Texas Instruments, can also make microchips and have facilities all over the US, but can't make chips as complex as computer microprocessors. Importantly, though, there's nothing stopping them from investing capital to build such a facility. They just don't want to. Developing an in-house microprocessor to compete with AMD and Intel at this point would require an outrageous investment. Israel is also another big up-and-comer in chip manufacturing. Why TSMC is of note is the pandemic showed just how vulnerable the US and the West are to losing access to TSMC production. If China, for example, were to invade Taiwan, it could be a really big problem for the economy and availability of these chips. This is why TSMC is building a chip foundry in Arizona right now, so chip production can happen domestically in the US. To OP, we're also talking about bleeding-edge technology. It's not generally available techniques like what you would have in older industries. And the investment necessary to get to the same level when these large existing actors in the field are still gradually reducing their level from 5 nm to 3 nm and to 2 nm these days. There's simply not any easy way of just starting up something on the same level. You have to come out of the gate as one of the best in the world, and that's generally a very hard thing to do. 73K employees, Intel 124K, 124 Electronics 270K, 2Intel and Samsung, but Intel and Samsung have a far wider product range than TSMC. They're on their own level for what they do, and there's only a few actors in the world that have the resources and know-how to get to that level. Samsung and Intel generally, as you already mentioned. It's not that other companies can't replicate them. It's that the amount of startup money needed to get a top-of-the-line chip manufacturing facility running is immense. In the 80s, the Taiwanese government put up a large amount of that startup money, believing that it would pay off later, and it did. Lots of companies decided they'd rather pay Taiwan's company to manufacture their chips for them instead of building their own facilities. You also can't replicate them either. At this point, there are trade secrets, billions of R&D, and general employee expertise that make it almost impossible for a newcomer to compete with TSMC and Samsung at the leading edge. Intel had all the resources in the world and was competitive until maybe 5 years ago, when it started to fall behind TSMC. It's not entirely clear why they weren't able to achieve the same success as TSMC, whether it's a leadership issue or maybe something cultural. I'm with you. I read the title and jumped in to find out about the tastiest chips in the world. So disappointed. Semiconductor manufacturing is the most difficult mass production on the planet. It requires tremendous amounts of investment to build and operate a fab. Each successive semiconductor generation, often called a node, is getting more difficult and expensive to design and produce, with the possibility of it being delayed, faulty, increasing. This happened with Intel's 10 nanometers process. As a result, a lot of companies dropped out, and at the bleeding edge we're left with 3 main players: Intel, Samsung, and TSMC. Currently, TSMC has the best process. Right now it's being used for the new iPhone Pro and Apple M3 series, and should expand to more products from AMD and Nvidia by the end of the year. There's also one main company left producing the machinery to make these highly advanced nodes economical: ASML. These machines are very complex, expensive, and limited in quantity per year. TSMC's leadership role isn't a guarantee. Intel and Samsung aren't that far behind, and Intel in the last few years has dumped tremendous amounts of money into R&D, more than AMD, Nvidia, and TSMC combined, in an effort to close that gap. Intel claims they will take leadership from TSMC within the next 18 months or so, but this is certainly not a guarantee and remains to be seen. Another aspect is that Intel is only now just beginning to open their fabs to external design companies. For a long time, companies like AMD, Qualcomm, Nvidia, etc. went with TSMC because they were the best available for them. A few years ago, Global Foundries was close enough to be considered, but they've since dropped out of the leading node market, and last-gen Nvidia sourced from Samsung because their 8nm node was good enough and cheaper than TSMC's 7nm node, and Nvidia was able to compete due to their extremely good architecture design that offset some of this discrepancy. This topic is actually quite fascinating. It's incredible to learn about the complexities involved in manufacturing chips and the different players in the industry. I had no idea about the enormous financial investment required to operate a chip manufacturing facility, or the intense competition between companies like TSMC, Intel, and Samsung. The fact that these companies are continually pushing the boundaries of technology, striving to produce the most advanced chips, is truly mind-boggling. Also, the geopolitical implications of chip production and the vulnerability of the supply chain have far-reaching consequences that I never considered. It's a complex world, that's for sure. Okay, so tell me more about the bleeding-edge technology involved in chip manufacturing and how it's constantly evolving. Also, can you explain more about the intense competition between TSMC, Intel, and Samsung to achieve the leadership role in producing the most advanced chips? Let me know in the comments down below, and let's move right into our next Reddit post. How does a company make money from steep discount? I just bought a game 85% off on Steam for a discontinued series, and I own all the previous titles. Assuming the publisher makes no profit from this sale, how do they make future revenue from me? Older games have already made the money they're going to make. Any money they can make on discounted sales is just a bonus. There is also the idea that if you tried selling it at full price and did not get your development cost back, selling at a discount is at least getting you something. Some sales are going to be better than no sales, so you might as well get a little. A couple of ways. 1, the 85% could be from a wildly inflated price. 2, they've already paid off all of their development costs and were previously making about 15% profit back when they had all those bills. One of the major advantages of digital anything is that you have major upfront costs, but making digital copies is practically free. Similar to how the first pill, a pharmacy company, costs billions of dollars, but the second costs a few cents. When I worked at Best Buy, I'd buy a 10-feet charger for $1.25 after employee discount when they were selling at retail at $29.99. The $1.25 was with a built-in 5% profit margin. The first X amount of sales aren't really profit. It goes into development costs. After a time, it goes from in the red to black because after, say, 100,000 copies at $60, it's paid all the costs associated with releasing the game. This is way oversimplified. Now they can sell it for half price and still make 100% profit. Digital products are a little unique. The first copy takes huge amounts of time, effort, and money to make, but every copy after that is free. If a company spent $100 making a game and thought they could sell 10 to 12 copies, they need to price it at $10 to make their money back. After they sell the 10th copy of the game, everything is profit, even if it's only $0.01. But what if they only sold 5 copies? They still need to sell $50 worth of games to make their money back. Maybe 10 more people would be interested in the game for $5. There are many reasons for a sale, altruism, and recouping losses as above, but the biggest reason is for promotion. Maybe it's a multiplayer game. More people playing keeps the game alive, and in-game transactions are future profit. Promote the brand, promote the next game, the next season, etc. Unlike traditional advertisement, putting an old game on sale generates money rather than costing. There is no downside. This is very interesting. I'd love to explain this in a way that makes sense and gets everyone excited about how companies make money from steep discounts. Alright, so here's the deal. When a company sells a product at a steep discount, like 85% off, they're not making much money from that individual sale, especially if it's an older game or product that's already made most of its profit. But here's the genius part. By offering these discounts, they entice more people to buy their product. So when you buy that game at a huge discount, you're likely to tell your friends about it, or maybe buy other games from the same series at full price in the future. And on top of that, many companies make money from in-game purchases or additional content for the game you bought. So even if they're not making much from the original sale, they're setting themselves up for future revenue from loyal customers like you. Can you believe how smart these companies are? Have you ever experienced this with a game or product you bought at a steep discount? Tell me about it. Well, that's another episode of Explain Like I'm 5 in the books. I really appreciate all of you who made it this far into the video. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, it would really help the channel out a lot if you gave the video a thumbs up, subscribe, or leave a comment down below. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.